Hi, and today I'm going to be showing you how I set up a mini Paludarium in a 30cm Exo Terra cube. Also, if you want to see how I repaired and resealed this enclosure, then I'll leave a card on the top right which you can check out later. Before I could do anything, I first started off by testing the water pump. This is important because if I find out that the water pump doesn't work after I finish everything, then there is the possibility that I may have to tear everything down and start again. Luckily for me, the pump worked just fine, so I can get on with the build straight away. I began by cutting up some egg crate to make the waterfall section. I wanted to make an enclosed area for the water pump so that it can be kept hidden and make it more aesthetically pleasing. I also had to design the waterfall so that the water pump could be easily taken in or out, because water pumps all eventually fail and have to be replaced. So I got the two pieces of egg crate, tied them together with zip ties, then covered it all with insect mesh. My plan is to tuck this into the corner of the tank, then later spray over it with expanding foam to make it look nice. I made the land portion in a similar way to how I made the waterfall. I cut up the egg crate into the appropriate shapes and sizes, tied them together with zip ties, and covered the whole thing with insect mesh. Here are all the pieces I used to make the land area. The process took much longer than I expected, but I couldn't cut any corners as this is a very important part. I had to make sure that the platform would be strong so that it would be able to support the weight of everything that's going to be on top of it and not collapse. Once the frame was finished, I then added the expanding foam. I shook the can for about 30 seconds, then applied the foam to the back wall. Just a few things to remember when using expanding foam. 1. Always wear gloves, because if expanding foam gets on your hand, it can be very hard to peel off. 2. It's not a bad idea to overdo it with expanding foam, because you can always carve it back if it's too much. However, just remember that expanding foam does expand quite a lot, maybe a bit more than you'd expect. So just keep that in mind when you want to incorporate rocks and wood into the background. And finally 3. I'd suggest that you follow a certain pattern when applying the foam. For example, I like to apply the foam on the edges first, then fill in the inside using a zigzag pattern. Following a certain pattern will allow all the crevices to be filled up and there won't be any gaps in the foam. Once the foam had dried a bit, I stuck on a piece of wood, a plastic pot, and some fake vines which I made earlier. I made the vine by twisting together some twine string and burlap before adding some silicone onto it. I then covered it with substrate to give it a more natural texture and colour. After a few hours, the foam had completely dried and had finished expanding. So I went ahead and began carving the foam. The reason I'm cutting the foam is because I'm later going to be attaching some substrate onto the background using some silicone, and silicone does not stick to the smooth surface of the foam. I'm also going to be using this as a chance to shape the background to how I want it to be like. To carve the foam I used a snap-off knife and a razor blade. I always found the snap-off knife particularly useful because you can control how long the blade is. At first it's a little hard because the outer layer is pretty tough, but once you get through that, it's pretty easy. I then later found this piece of wood which I thought would be perfect for the waterfall, so I got it in place using this piece of string and applied some more expanding foam. Once the foam on the back had all cured and been carved, I then went on to spraying the foam onto the right wall. I also poked some twigs into the side because I wanted to try and make it look like there were vines or roots going into the ground. This little detail will make the Paludarium look even better and go along really well with the rest of the hardscape. Having done that, I placed some rocks and wood on the edge of the water area before making a ledge out of expanding foam. This ledge will separate the water and the land and also create a barrier to hold in the substrate. I again carved off the surface of the foam once it had all cured. I also poked a few holes in the foam so that the water can come out of the waterfall. I then did a quick water test and the waterfall worked just fine. So I went straight on to the next task, which was to attach the substrate to the background. To do this I used some aquarium safe silicone and caulked it out onto the foam. I spread the silicone evenly along the background using my hands while wearing gloves of course, then poured the substrate over it. I tried to do this in small sections because I didn't want the silicone to dry out. A word of warning to anyone who wants to try this, silicone does have a very strong vinegary smell, so I'd recommend that you wear a mask when you try this, although even then you'll still be able to smell it. Next I added some hydro balls, which I probably didn't have to do since I already had a false bottom, but I thought it would mean that less substrate would fall into the water area. I also added some insect mesh to separate the hydro balls from the substrate. Then I added in the substrate. For the substrate I used Arcadia Earth mixed with their biorevitalizer. Having added the substrate, I then began planting. I first started off with a bromeliad, which I stuffed into this plastic pot. Next I added in the creeping fig, which I'm hoping will climb up and cover up the walls. I then added some polka dot plants, which will add a splash of colour to the Paludarium. The baby tears will hopefully spread and cover the ground. I also added a small fern into this corner, although I'm not sure how well it will do since it's been covered up by the bromeliad and there's not a lot of space left. I then poured in some white sand and added some gravel to give it a more natural look. Once that was done, I then poured the water into the tank. I poured the water where the water pump was because I wanted to make sure that the sand wouldn't be disturbed. Finally, to finish off, I put the salvinia in the water. And here's the finished Paludarium. Personally, this is my favourite tank so far, and I really hope that I don't end up killing the plants. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.